We are live. Okay, the attendee count is already going up, so let's get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Be Waste Wise. I am Shweta Dandapani. I'm one of the community builders on Be Waste Wise. Today, we have Adam Reed, the Chief Sustainability and External Affairs Officer from Suez Recycling and Recovery, moderating the webinar. The topic for today's webinar is Squaring the Circular Economy, How to Make Reducing Waste Easy for All. We have Emma Jordan, Head of External Communications, also from Suez. And we have Khalid Abubakar, Senior Associate at the University of Cambridge Institute of Sustainability Leadership. A few admin information to you. Please use Q&A for your questions. Use chat to introduce yourselves. And I just have one more request from Be Waste Wise. We have a fundraiser running right now. It'll be absolutely great if you can have a look at it, share it with others. And if you are able to donate, that'll be really great for us. So over to you, Adam.
Thank you, Shweta. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. And if you're listening back to this whilst doing the ironing or the washing, enjoy. Yes, I'm Dr. Adam Reed, and this is not my first rodeo, is it, Shweta? We've done a few of these together, and I thoroughly enjoy the global nature of the conversation. So, audience, get as stuck in as you like. Use the chat, tell us who you are, pose a question for the panel. We'll get them to give you an opinion or two. So I guess, why am I, a waste management practitioner, interested in squaring the circular economy? This is a very good question. I get asked it a lot, and that's because the future of waste management is not waste management. We all know that, so I didn't need to tell you that, did I? If we're serious about net zero, decarbonisation, one planet living, resource efficiency, whichever phrase you want to use, we've got to manage resources better and make much better decisions, whether we're consumers or industry, and politicians too. And therefore, if we're going to make the circular economy the new economy, let's call it, if that's going to become the norm, then the whole concept of make, break, discard has to change. And this idea of single use has to be a thing of the past that we look back on in many years' time in a museum somewhere near you, and we go, what a bunch of crazy fools. How did they ever live in that kind of way? But in order to do that, we need to understand what the circular economy is in order that we can then start to implement those kinds of behaviours. But two, I'm interested in, I guess, what is a circular economy behaviour? What can you and I do as a consumer or as a layperson, not as a politician, not as a practitioner, just people on the street. And then B, are we using the right language and narrative to drive this agenda? And hence I've got this really expert panel to join me. So I'm going to say hello quickly to Emma. Hello, Emma. How are you?
Morning. I'm good, thank you.
So Emma works for me, which means she's going to be on her best behaviour, but she's also running a research project that we've got with an economics team external to Suez, looking at how we normalise the circular economy. And I'm going to ask her to present a few ideas in a moment, and also talk about how we've been testing that in the policy landscape of the UK right now, which is all talk about the circular economy. Not sure we can define it very well. And then I've got Khalid. Khalid, say hello. Khalid, how are you?
Hello. Yeah, I'm very well, thank you. Thanks, Adam.
And what is it you do? Because you've got an interesting background, but currently you've got a couple of hats that you're wearing, aren't you?
Absolutely, hat and feet and so many different buckets, should we say. I would say I usually stand with one foot in data, in sort of circularity data or data-driven, sort of the development of data-driven frameworks and methodologies for the advancement of circularity. And then the other foot is actually in a very sort of messy real-world value chain. So working with different value chains to essentially understand how data or how data can actually help them identify circular sort of hotspots for the advancement or for the sort of for the generation of, should we say, circular business models and advancement of circularity in general. I sort of work with different organizations. As an academic, I do lots of research work, collect data from different value chains, develop new theories, develop new frameworks. I work in road mapping, sort of future proving circularity, and also developing business model frameworks. So my current research is actually looking into the business models for the high integrity sector. So for value retention, essentially working with the University of Exeter and partnering with National Institute of Manufacturing in Scotland. So I've got so many, should we say, tentacles.
Fabulous. And we'll make sure we draw on a few of those as the session grows. And also a big shout out to everybody that's put their name in a box so far. It's good to see that we've got South Africa, we've got Austria, we've got a few UK practitioners too. So this is really exciting. Let me close the sunshine out of my. There we go. We're much better, nice in the dark now. Emma, tell me,
Yes.
what's this report that we've been working on? What's it suggesting, and what does it mean for both policy landscape and implementation? I know we're talking the UK here, but ultimately this could be applied anywhere.
Yes, indeed. And in fact, it needs to be in order to make the circular economy a reality, I would say. I've got some slides, which I'm now going to endeavour to seamlessly share.
You want me to talk over you while you do that?
Please do.
No, you can stress with the technology. There we go.
Right, there we go. Look at that, almost seamless. Right. So if I just talk a little bit about kind of the why we've carried out this piece of research, I think it's something that I guess as someone communications professional is my background, but working in waste for about the last 15 to 20 years, it's something I'm particularly passionate about, is communicating what we do. And I think we commissioned the consultancy's WPI Economics to look at the circular economy, but from a consumer perspective. The reason being that I think consumers, their habits, what people buy, how they buy it, whether they buy it at all, are really central to the creation of a circular economy. But it's an area that we have felt had up until quite recently been fairly neglected, with more focus put on other parts of the value chain, like the systems and infrastructure that we also need. And I think, hang on, less seamless now. Oh,
yep.
Super. So I just wanted to start about thinking about language and the term circular economy, which has come, certainly in the UK, commonplace across the value chain for probably around the last 2 decades. Certainly the first Suez report about the circular economy was back in 2009. Indeed, I think it's probably one of the things that inspired me to join the company at the time, when I was fairly new to the sector, seeing how forward thinking we were. And that was achieving the vision of no more waste, engaging in a circular economy. So it's something that, language that others in the value chain use, but consumers aren't speaking our language. Perhaps it's better to look at it from a consumer perspective and say that we aren't talking their language. And, why does that matter? Well, it means we're missing opportunities to engage them, to, get them to understand what it's all about and why it's important. And when, in the cases where they are doing circular things already, buying circular products, using circular services, which they are, we miss the opportunity to build on that. And I think sometimes when we use the term circular economy, we quite literally make people switch off. One of the things that was identified in the report was that a waste authority had produced a video for their social media that had the term circular economy, and they identified at the point at which that term was used, they suddenly saw a drop off. People were stopping watching, didn't continue to finish the film. So they re-recorded the voiceover using different language and saw a much better continue through to the end. So I think it's really important that we're not, actively switching people off. So consumers, they're not with us on the journey yet, or at least not intentionally so. And this is a theme that we saw echoed at Labour Party conference back at the end of September, where we ran a fringe event on the circular economy. And there were also 5 or so others on the fringe event agenda on similar or related topics. And there was a consensus that the term circular economy just isn't working outside of the sector. Everybody was agreed on that, but I think, as you've already alluded to, what there wasn't any agreement on was what would be a better language to use to engage people. And that's really is the challenge that we're facing.
Is this an opportunity, Emma, to like engage the audience and say if they've got a better phrase for the circular economy, we want it in
Absolutely.
the chat?
Yes, for sure. And I keep thinking there's all these really super like bright minds in advertising and creatives. I think somebody somewhere must be able to come up with something that resonates better. And it might not even be, as I think we'll come on to, it might not be one term, might not, but I think it's, it's the circular economy is kind of conceptual, and actually we need, as we'll come on to, talk to people in the language about what they're actually doing. And part of WPI economics research was consumer focus groups, and they recruited two distinct sets of people. The first group were more like self-confessed pro-environment, environmentally conscious. The other group was selected for the fact that they were precisely the opposite. And what you saw was that group one, in terms of their motivations, they were more ethical, they were proactive in seeking out choices that they felt would benefit the environment. They were more engaged, they were happy to, really keen to improve on what they were already doing. Whereas group two were a bit more skeptical. They were driven by what was practical, what worked for them, and cost and convenience for key. If it wasn't the right price, if it was too difficult, then they'd quickly disengage. And I think neither group really understood the term circular economy. Even the people that was kind of thought they did, actually, when they were asked to explain it, they couldn't. And a lot of the time it was being confused with recycling. So they're like, well, circular economy, that's recycling, right? We're doing it. There was not really an understanding that actually it takes more than that. And that was, I think, the subject of another piece of Suez work last year with Keep Britain Tidy, looking at the waste hierarchy and how do we encourage people to do more without deterring them from recycling, because clearly we need them to keep doing that. But on a more positive note, people are already doing circular things, or what we would consider circular things. They are, and some quite UK specific terms here, but Vinted, I think, is an international platform. So people, you've bought something, you've realised it doesn't quite fit, and you've run out of time to return it. Well, you can sell it on Vinted and somebody else will make use of it. Or if you need a dress for that special occasion, you can get one there that's only been worn a handful of times. Or people are buying refurbished tech to save some money. Rather than owning a bike, if they live in a city, they might use the electric bike hire schemes that are commonplace. And something that's quite frequent here is where people get their milk delivered to their doorstep in glass bottles. You return the bottle to the doorstep, milkman picks it up, takes it away, cleans it, refills it. All of those things are circular. People just don't see them through a circular lens. That's not how they think about what they're doing. And because each group has kind of different needs, well, they have different levels of knowledge, different circumstances, different priority, their needs are different when it comes to communicating with them. But one thing that was common to both was a real desire to get back to basics. And by basics, that's recycling, which I think is something that we might often take for granted. So like help them to get that right, to understand what that involves, and then that gives you a platform to build on. And I think in the UK next year, we've got simpler recycling coming in for households. Inevitably, there will be a bit of a spotlight on recycling. So that gives us a chance, I see that as an opportunity to talk about recycling, but then also the what more. And clearly, we also have circular economy strategy due. So yeah, next year is the year of circular, but not using that word.
This is like some kind of quiz show. You've got to describe the circular economy without using the word circular, and you realize how quickly you can't. By the way, we've got resource efficiency in the shout outs. It's not bad. Been used before. Is it fully circular? I'm not sure. I like Karen in the City of London, bigs up. Make, do and mend. I'm loving that. I think that takes me back to my childhood. Christine has given us the it's all closed loop. I'm not sure my mum knows what closed loop means any more than she knows what the circular economy means, but I know what you mean, Christina. Thank you. Keep bringing them in. Value maxing. There's a nice one.
Ooh, like that. And now
Sorry, Emma.
I think I've just jumped to slides, so I'm just going to leave it there. So in terms of what does this mean? And I think the conclusions that we're coming to is that we need to shift the narrative. And when it comes to the circular economy strategy that we'll be seeing in the next couple of months, that needs to have a consumer focus and enable others to have a consumer focus. And we see that as covering 4 key areas. So the first one is, I think already being a comms professional speaking about, is language. We need to talk in the same language as normal people, non-sector people, Adam's mum, my teenage son, my group of middle-aged friends, you know, like talk about what they're doing using the words that they use. So is it vintage? Is it pre-loved? Is it secondhand? Do you reuse something, or do you give it away? Do you donate it? Like, what is it that people actually say? And I was thinking, some of the businesses that I see on the high street, like iFix, iSmash, super clear what fix, like what it, the services that they're providing. And I think there's definitely something in the language. We also, we need to facilitate, we need to make circular choices the easy choice. Not, we know that for some people, if you add in extra effort, they're just not going to do it. So how can we make it easier and remove barriers? We can think about like using existing local networks and services, making information really readily available. Things like, you know, when you want to get something repaired, having, you know, accreditation schemes and making that more widely known. Like, I know if something breaks in my bathroom, I need a plumber. I'm quite clear on that. And I can, you know, I know places to go to look for one of those. But if another device, the plethora of devices we have in our households today, you know, if one of those breaks, if it's my microwave or my dishwasher, like what type of engineer do I need to fix that? And where do I go about finding one that I can trust to do it right? That's more challenging. So I think there's definitely something in making it easier. We need to inspire people and to motivate them. We've got to lean in to their different interests, their different, think about their different circumstances. You know, we know what will nudge one person won't nudge another. So is it environment? Is it cost? Is it convenience? And empowering them with information to help them make those choices. And then lastly, I think it's when it comes to delivery, you need stakeholders working together in a joined up way that everybody puts the consumer at the center. And I think like quite a simple example is we have here for batteries in-store return schemes that have been commonplace for a really long time. And I think a sort of starting point with the research was everybody knows about those, right? And people can use them, but actually they might know about them. They don't all know about them. But when you go to, you gather your little bag of batteries, you take them to your local supermarket to return them, and then can you find the container, or is it hidden behind a pillar somewhere? And if it's not hidden and it's in kind of easy, if it's somewhere easy to locate as you walk into the store, is it full of people's rubbish, like their crisp packets and things? Is there space to put your batteries in there? Thinking about the consumer at every step and everybody working together, I think can make a really significant difference.
Thank you, Emma. Some really interesting thoughts. When's this report due out?
Before the end of the year, imminently.
Good news. And we will make sure that there's a link made available through the platform, Sweater, so that everybody can see it in its full glory. But we appreciate any commentary or input that the esteemed audience have now. So some of these ideas are great, and I think a few people have raised the cost issue and the value of the product and versus the relative cost of the repair. So access is an interesting catch-all, isn't it? It's ease of access, but isn't just about time necessarily or knowledge, but it could be that relative economics piece. I'll let you catch up with the text, and you can see what people are saying. Khalid,
yeah,
we did give you like literally 5 minutes warning that we were going to present a few ideas to get your feedback. Go on, the floor is yours. I mean, is this narrative? I mean, you're a data man, but also you're interested in the circular economy and its ultimate delivery across many sectors. Is any of this resonating with you, or is Emma barking up the wrong tree?
Absolutely. I think that is the sort of the general consensus really is that circular economy as a concept is very, very confusing, right?
Okay.
Because the people that it matters most to is the consumers, the general public. So without the general public sort of buy-in and really good understanding of the concept or the roles that they play in making circular economy sort of happen, it's actually a complete failure, right? And I conducted some research with you. Actually, I published one of the first, or one of the only publications that looks into the circularity narrative, or the practices, the different practices, should we say, in circular economy. You know, there are some R's. I don't know how many R's we have now. It started with about 4 R's. Now I think we have about 9 R's. And how do these R's manifest in the UK? Now, if you stop someone in the street and say circular economy, what is circular economy? You'd almost certainly get an answer about recycling, about sorting bins, you know, into different colors. I mean, at the beginning of this conversation, we talked about the bin colors here in Milton Keynes, where I live. But I don't think that is actually a failure of the public. It mirrors, you know, it's sort of, you know, this is a held up kind of, should we say, consensus, and we've been talking about these, or we've been characterizing, or we've been sort of, should we say, framing circularity within waste, within the management of waste, within recycling for decades. So to bring you close to home, so in my research in the UK, I looked into several documents, several roadmaps, strategy documents, publications like what the report that you're actually producing now, and all of these different documents. Now, when we pulled out the concrete actions within the UK, I can say that 1 in every 2 was simply around recycling. So about 40, I think, specifically across the UK as a whole, recycling accounted for about 42% of, should we say, about 43% of all of the circular activities, right? Far ahead of repair, far ahead of reuse, far ahead of remanufacture. Now, these are all R's. Now, for those of you familiar with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation framework, we know that, I mean, somebody mentioned in the chat about circularity is about loops, and then of course Adam said that, you know, an average person wouldn't understand what the loops are. Now, we have what we call the inner loops, and we've got what we call the outer loops, right? So the inner loops meaning essentially appeal to the very core of circularity, meaning we keep resources in circulation, we keep the value, right? So something is manufactured to perform a particular function. We want that item to continue to perform that function for as long as possible, right? It's whether I am owning the item, or whether I'm sharing with other people, whether a company is owning that item and is selling the service of that item, not that item. So people sort of utilize, people get the utility of that item rather than owning that item. Whatever the model is, as long as that item remains performing the function it's been designed to perform for as long as possible, that is where we want to be, right? Of course, this item continues to perform this function. At some point, there would be wear and tear, there would be parts of that item falling apart that would need to keep that item functional, right? But then if this item was designed to stay in circulation for as long as possible, the item would be made modular, or it would be designed for longevity and so on and so forth. So this is what we call the upstream innovation. So, you know, so the item has to be designed with this in mind in the first place, okay? And now it carries on, and then, of course, it gets to a place where this item needs to be refurbished. So it goes out and then back into circulation again. At some point, the item would lose all of its economic value, meaning we'd have to break the item up and then recycle, take components out, and then feed it back into the loop, right? So recycling, of course, is a key element of circular economy, but it's not the most desirable element of circular economy. But then, the world is actually currently grappling with the exigencies and the externalities of the linear economy, because everything that is being produced, everything that we know today is actually produced under the linear economy model. All the bottles, all the television sets, everything that we're seeing today are linear, because businesses have got a lot of inertia to make these radical changes, change the models so that an item that they produce stays in consumption or in circulation for where do they make their money? So circular business models are not very easy for companies to adopt, right? So this is the reason why the narrative has stayed around recycling and around sort of waste management. So if you're a citizen, what do you experience? Your council, talks to you about recycling targets. National media always celebrates Britain's best recyclers. You get leaflets and everything in all of these things about recycling. That is because we're trying to solve all of the externalities of the linear economy, and we haven't got the time to actually go upstream and start talking about redesign. And of course, consumers, what they do best is consumption, is consume, right? So I think the narrative targeting consumers is around waste management and recycling, because they don't have any significant role to play in the design of the product that they use in the first place, right? So I think what we need to do is to get them to force manufacturers, to force businesses to start producing for circularity, right? So that the narrative, there will be a shift of narrative from the waste-centric approach to designing for circularity. I don't know if I've overtalked or if I've sort of done justice to this, but this is my take. This is my summary.
Not at all. I think I think there were two messages that I took in there. One is that, the public do what the public do, and if you give them the right opportunities, they will make good decisions. And we need to get government to work with industry to drive more circular business models, because without them, you don't have the option. It's very hard to opt in to circularity at times. I think some of this commentary that's coming down the right-hand side here is fascinating. So let's have a quick thing. Give me your favorite example of a circular behavior that we think we should be normalizing here, whether it be in the UK or in South Africa or in Austria or India. I see just popped up. Go on, Emma. Give me what's your favorite circular economy behavior? Yours is going to be something to do with selling clothes online, knowing you.
No. Although I do have plenty that I bought in the hope I would fit into them and haven't. Probably, I think, getting things repaired rather than going and just immediately replacing them with something new, if there's still plenty of life left in them. Like, I think I've recently replaced my vacuum cleaner, and a number of years ago, because it really is on its last legs, but a number of years ago I was like, asking people's views, and they were like, well, did you know that you can switch out the battery, because it was a handheld? And I was like, I just didn't know that. And as soon as someone said that, I was like, well, that's obviously a much cheaper option. Then I found a YouTube video that showed me how to take it apart and clean it, and kind of give it my own home service. Now, unfortunately, it has gone beyond. And then when I've replaced it, I've gone, do you know, rather than buying a new one, I've bought a refurbished one from a brand's own website. So I've got the kind of guarantees. But I think don't just immediately jump to replace it. There are sometimes some simple fixes.
Okay. And Khalid, is there anything that you do that's particularly, circular that you're proud of?
Absolutely. Apart from what I'm doing in the UK, which is quite high end, I think it's going to bore everyone to death, which is all in the high integrity sector, sort of circular alloys and that sort of thing. I would probably bring us closer to something that we can all resonate with. So I've done a lot of work with UNIDO, trying to get 3 flagship sectors in Ghana, in particular, in one of the sort of things they have, it's a developing country that is fast adopting circular economy. So there are 3 main value chains. There's the agro-processing value chain, there is the textiles value chain, and then there is the plastics value chain. I mean, plastics is one of the main, should we say, focus sector globally, right? But I'm not going to go into plastics. Textile. So Ghana imports pretty much all of the used clothes that we give to charity here in the UK and other parts of the world. I think Ghana has got the largest secondhand clothing market, right? And then that comes with so many externalities. There are significant microfiber pollution that has, Accra, which is the capital, I think has got one of the most polluted sort of, should we say, areas in the world, with microfibers, and also a lot of textiles, because the textiles that come to Ghana, I think about 40% of them are doomed on arrival. They are of such bad quality. And of course, these days, these materials are quite composite, that they're not pure fibers like cotton or any of those other fibers, but they come in sort of composite forms, so it's really, really difficult to disaggregate them or do anything with them. I worked with UNIDO to get into this particular value chain, and at the moment, they are able to do a lot of upcycling. Okay, so previously, when they sort out these textiles, when they come, about 60% of them are readily sort of usable. They're able to sell them to get sort of value out of them. 40% of them end in these waterways, and some of them are actually so badly disintegrated that they can't do anything with them. We have trained lots of local, should we say, informal sector workers. Some of them that are sort of these market women. Yep. To replicate some of the advances being, the results of research from the developed country, from the UK. There's a company in Scotland, ACS Clothing. I don't know if you know. It's actually they're about the only clothing, wholly circular clothing company in the UK. It's based in Scotland, and we've had so many engagements with them, and we've borrowed some of the technology, some of the approaches, and now in Ghana, they don't even have enough of these formerly discarded sort of fibers, unusable fibers. They don't have enough of them to upcycle. Some of them are turned into, they turn them into like Joseph's coats of many colors and that sort of thing. So they're able to get newer, very, very usable upcycled garments out of these things, and then their prices or their values now are skyrocketing. And then there is a new cohort of sustainability or sustainable minded people in Ghana, and even so they're actually exporting some of these things to neighboring countries. Some of them are actually even making their ways back to the UK. And the ones that are not usable as clothing, they put them together, they mix them with other sort of binders, and they're able to produce so many different products like hangers, even some of them make their way into the construction business. So they have now valorized the second-hand clothing sector in Ghana, and these are being replicated elsewhere in West Africa. So this is one of the very key success stories
I mean, they're great examples. And I think you use the words valorization there, which I've never been a fan of as a word, but I absolutely get what it means. And I think a few people in the chat have been talking about it's about value of the resources, and actually what your models in Africa are showing is the creativity that enables valorization. And I worry that in the West, and we don't have to talk about the UK, we could talk about Germany, Denmark and Sweden, we could talk about the US, we could talk about Australia. I think it's the same problem. We don't value the resource anywhere near enough. We don't value the products, apart from maybe the car example in the chat, because you've sunk 30, 40, 50,000 pounds into something you might own for a decade. And therefore it's in your interest to A, look after it, and B, repair it, because you just can't, toss it and buy a new one. Whereas, your tech, Emma, there gets a point where it's quicker and easier to go on Amazon, other platforms are available, and buy one that's there tomorrow than it is to go to a reuse cafe for somebody to assess it and tell you it'll be ready in a week when you need toast tomorrow. You can't wait a week for your toast, can you?
No,
well, you can.
No. But I think exactly that. It's that fast tech has become a real challenge in terms of, and I was thinking of something my mum used to say when I was younger, probably still says now: buy cheap, buy twice. And if you can afford to buy something that will last longer, but I think that kind of mantra has been lost a bit. And repair, there's a lot of, as well as professional repair services, they're the volunteer angle as well. But I work full time, as lots of people do. I can't, if there's a repair cafe that's on in the middle of the day on a Wednesday, like I'm at work. So it's got to be, I think people have got so used to the convenience of just in time services, of people coming to your house, like almost everything comes to your door now, that looking at some of those models and thinking, like, how can that be replicated? And so you need, your toaster needs repairing. Well, can I have a temporary toaster for, like you would get if your car goes into the garage, you get a car,
Hire car.
a hire car, similar basis. If it's something that's really essential to the running of a household, you know, that would probably, it's about reducing the friction, I think, and also making the less circular choice, maybe considering adding some friction in there.
Okay, so it's interesting. Katie's made a really valid point here about things like online marketplaces for secondhand clothing might just generate more clothing because people buy stuff and then sell it and then they spend some more stuff, and they've got a new cycle. It's just not the cycle we were hoping for. And I think that's a really interesting point, because again, do we really value the item? No, we value the transaction. And I think there's some really interesting points here as we look to evolve policy on one hand, and we're looking to businesses to come up with alternative business models. Because look, we know there are businesses out there that are operating far more circular models than others in their market. And there's good examples of I think Mud Jeans is one that I quite like. The idea that you kind of get your jeans mended, and if they're not mendable, they give you a different pair, and your jeans grow with you, whether you're on a diet or whether you're just getting old. I love the concept, and I think, but that's me buying a service, isn't it? That's me buying into a brand who's going to go with me on a journey. A bit like tech, some people like Apple, some people don't, some people like Sony historically or whatever. And I think you want to go with the brand on the journey. So if that brand can offer you a service that isn't purely consuming goods, but it's consuming services, I think that's another way we can make things more circular. I mean, Helen, as somebody that works with businesses a little bit, are you seeing a trend here that businesses want to look at more circularity just because the cost of everything is getting higher, or not?
No, it's there's always a very big gap between intent and action, right? And I think the problem that businesses are facing is that they are in the middle. So if we took secular modes of delivery are in three different clusters. We've got the micro, the meso, and the macro. So the government and all of the socially enabling entities are not doing enough to provide the necessary incentives for businesses to radicalize their business models. Okay. And also there is sort of like that inertia amongst businesses that, okay, so should we do this? How about our competitors? Will they be on the same sort of kind of journey to transform their business models? And what would consumers say? Because consumers, are they really into that philosophy of reuse? Are they really into just deriving the utility from the product rather than owning the product itself? Now, if we live in a world where I could literally press on the button and get exactly the same stuff. Say, for example, I've got school runs to perform in the morning. I would literally walk out of my door and I would get a car, take the kids to school, be able to run all of my errands and come home without having to own the car. Oh. If we have a system that can deliver this utility so seamlessly, close to, if not better than me doing it myself by owning the car, then I think people might accept that philosophy. But until we get there, and I think businesses would not risk sort of, adopting these sort of business models without having that 100% assurance that people would really, really buy into this philosophy. So there are these three, should we say, clusters of stakeholders that don't seem to be talking to each other.
I think you raise a really interesting point there about if you had access to a car, and of course every day of the week that car would be a different car, because it's the availability of that local car to do the service you need. Isn't that Uber? And Emma, I know you live in London. Everybody's on Uber.
Yeah, I was just thinking actually that cities are probably make delivery of some of these things more straightforward because of the concentration of people. Like, sharing, if you think of so there are car clubs. I think just around the corner from me, there's a car that parked that you can rent, you return it to the space. It's always in that designated space. Car sometimes changes. And if I think about like items that I don't use very often, and I don't like, because I live in a flat in a city, I don't have a huge amount of storage space. I don't particularly want to own something I use once a year. So things like libraries of things or being able to share something with neighbours is like a really appealing concept, and also very doable when everybody's close together and you've got the concentration of people that will make a service viable. So I definitely like cities, and you see some of, I think it was the recent London Circular Economy Week event where they had like a number of like circular businesses showing what they're doing in London, and it did seem to be that they were super successful on a neighbourhood basis, but it's like, how do you get the scale?
It's a good point. It's a great question coming for Khalid. So let's go with this one. It's about the quantity of textiles reaching Ghana, and about how much of that is then being upcycled. What have you got? Have you got some high level figures we could?
Let me see.
And if you haven't, we could always send them in afterwards. I don't want to put you on the spot.
Yeah, there's 144. I've got a slide somewhere. There's always something.
That's okay. Somebody's made a really interesting point about driverless cars making car ownership obsolete. I'm like, there's a dystopian future that's really quite worrying right here, right now. But anyway, good point.
So with regards to textiles, so yeah, there's 144,000 tons of secondhand clothes entering the Ghanaian market annually, and 23% becomes waste in wheat, and over 4,000 sort of tentacles. These are appendages and stuff that are washed into the neighboring lakes and that sort of thing, and microfiber. And I think microfiber pollution in the air is 100 times above acceptable sort of levels globally. In terms of the upcycling, I think we have about $18 million worth
a
year upcycling. Now, previously, that all of this was actually lost in value, right? But then now they're getting very, very close to 100%. Now, the ones that they're grappling with are the very, very cheap materials, from China and other places, which is neither cotton nor anything. So these are materials designed to mimic cotton, and then they often are quite synthetic. So they are neither good for upcycling nor are they friendly to the environment. So these are the ones that, of course, that we then have to move to another paradigm with regards to policy. So what are the policies? I mean, in Ghana, these policies don't even exist. In terms of the grading of some of these different sort of materials that are coming together. So that's a completely different conversation. Yeah, so in terms of value, it's about $80 million worth of materials every year.
Thank you. Tim's raised a really good question here, or a point about data, which I guess, Khalid, is your bread and butter, but I'm going to start with Emma, because it's about data to enable right decisions to be made, businesses to make good decisions, or businesses to report on their sustainability, or for consumers to make good choices because they can see that something's got an A-star rating or a red or a green score or whatever it might be. Are we moving towards better data to show the value of repair and reuse, or the savings because of repair and reuse from an environmental externalities perspective, perhaps?
Yeah, I think we're moving towards that, but probably still fairly early in the journey. We can talk about, through our own kind of calculations, that the carbon saved. But I guess it's thinking about like the data is important. People need to think what's in it for them, and for some that might be the environmental, but for others, when so the example here is reuse. Sometimes when you donate something for reuse and it's sold, some of the proceeds might go to help local good causes, or in certain instances things that are donated for reuse can go to young people leaving care, or can be upcycled by people in prison who were trying to learn skills so that when they're released they're less. So there are the social benefits as well, and I think it's thinking about the different nudges for different people, showing them that other people are doing it too. And making them feel good about the choices that they're making, because if you're kind of castigating people for doing the wrong thing, shaming them, guilt, that doesn't generally get them to do the right thing. That should be your last resort. Much better to try and make them feel positive about the choices they are making. So making that data on the environmental side, but then also making sure that the other upsides of what they're doing are really clear.
I think good point. So I think on the data, so if anybody's interested, Suez have got a number of reuse manifestos and guides that we've developed over the last couple of years, which are full of our real data from our sites, the value of goods that are coming through our facilities, the opportunities that they create for social benefit, but also the carbon savings associated with them. And I think when you start to realise the scale of the opportunity, just like Hallie's numbers from Ghana, the opportunities are huge, but it needs a new framework. It needs a different set of drivers. I mean, Hallie, are you seeing more demand for data to help make good decisions in all the sectors that you're working in?
100%. Most of the sectors are now adopting data-driven approaches. I've actually published I think probably the only existing road mapping framework, right? Circular economy road mapping methodology, and of course, data is at the heart of it. Some industries are doing better. I mean, some industries actually depend on data. Some of the safety critical industries, like the high-tech industries, aerospace, for example, all of the components, everything at all to enable circularity is 100% dependent on the availability of the data, because every component has to be able to communicate back. It has to be able to communicate back to a digital twin, traceability data, DPP, that's some digital product passport data. These are incredibly critical to those safety critical industries, right? In other industries where, say, for example, organizations, I'll talk about road mapping a little bit, where organizations or a nation or a city would like to develop a roadmap to achieve certain KPIs over a period of time. They need to have some very, very key critical baseline data, right? So baseline assessments of material flow data, so the inputs, so every resource that comes into the system and leaves the system from one stage to the other, they need to have the data for that. And of course, the other baseline data is with life cycle data, right? So what are some of the environmental sort of efficiency matrix, for every stage of the value chain within a city, within a country? So this data is very, very, very key for that country or for that city to be able to set their KPIs. If we want to achieve X, Y, and Z by 2025, what are we measuring, and against what are we measuring these things, right? So that baseline data is incredibly important, but they're not very, very easy to come by. I'll take you back to what I did with Ghana. The other value chain I work with, the agro-processing value chain. So they work with cassava, pineapples, and all of these other now they do have some existing sort of like very, very obsolete data sets from probably 20, 30 years ago about the cassava cultivation, harvest, transportation, and the rest of it. So many leakages. So when I went there, we built a data framework that identifies key data points from the farm stage right down to the processes where they peel all these things. Before, for example, data on byproducts was not considered as valuable data because they didn't see any use for, say, the cassava peels or the effluents that come from the process of these cassava. But now they've realized that, look, technology, now we are actually catching up with technology. We know what to convert these things into and produce new product from the byproducts of these crops that we harvest. So the data for this has become a very, very, very important component their sort of baseline assessments.
Good to know. And I think that's really important for all sectors and all material streams and all product types is, data is key. Right. I'm conscious of time. Good question here about is a lack of environmental awareness part of the problem when it comes to wasteful behavior? Emma, I mean, somebody that's grown up in the UK in this, boom and bust world that we live in, and everything's fast fashion and everything needs to be here yesterday. What's the level of environmental awareness like in your peer group and those that you're now trying to engage?
I would say thinking my peer group, like mid 40s with children, I think there's something about having a family that makes you perhaps think a little bit more about the future and what your children will inherit than I would say I think environmental awareness is definitely better now than it was when we were younger. Clearly it's different for each generation, and I think the people we're trying to engage, there is a level of environmental awareness that I think obviously we're seeing increasingly the impacts of climate change. People get certain aspects of it, but what they don't really engage in so much is that the best parts of the waste hierarchy. And I think what in certain respects, some people will want to be environmentally aware, but you can't, you can lead a horse to water, can't make it drink. So I think there is that element of thinking. What I'd love to see is some really widespread research into what different groups of consumers think and what motivates them in this space. Because I think in certain slightly adjacent related policy areas, we know that, for example, they're not so motivated by environmental messaging, but they really care in the UK about nature and countryside. And that is something that unites pretty much every group of consumers. And so framing messaging in terms of how it benefits that aspect of the environment is something that will resonate quite widely. And talking about the sort of longer term impacts for people's families, but perhaps people, although we love data works for us, I think actually it for sort of consumer messaging it doesn't impact in the same way. So we need to think differently and think about when it comes to the things that people consume, a lot of that is bound up in feelings and traditions and habits. It's different to other behaviors that you're trying to change. If you think some people will buy something new to get that kind of dopamine hit to make them feel good because something, to cheer themselves. I think we do have to think about it slightly differently, and environmental awareness is helpful, but it's only one piece of the puzzle.
Okay, so as we wrap up, if we were going to, Hallie, come to you first. If we're going to drive either consumer or business down a more circular route, my first question is, what triggers or levers are we going to have to pull, in your opinion? And secondly, is the narrative circular economy the right one to be doing it around?
Yeah, great question. I think I'm really glad Emma made that point about data and sort of the way we actually frame these narratives. Data and the way that we sort of characterize these externalities and everything else is very useful for those that make decisions out there. So the sort of national level at sort of business level, because these are the disruptors. These are the ones that would sort of make all of the necessary disruptions. So we've got this sort of pull-push sort of paradigm.
Yep.
The way that we frame these things to the consumer, to the ordinary person, is to try and contextualize it to their lived sort of reality. So lived example. How does, say, for example, all of these emission metrics, all of these life cycle metrics that we talk about, how does that manifest in your day-to-day sort of life? What does it mean? How do we contextualize these things? If we're able to break it down to make it have a meaning to them, then that is when we would get them to sort of to have a bit of a buy-in and understand their role, what they need, the role they need to play in order to to adopt and implement circularity. So I think framing is really, really important. We frame circularity differently at the macro level. We frame it differently at the meso level. But at the micro level, I think things have to be contextualized and really broken down to granular, lived reality sort of level for people to really understand their role in circularity.
Excellent. And Emma, same question to you, I guess.
Circular economy isn't the right narrative, I think, and I've still yet to land on what is the right one. And for me, I think it's a bit of both. It's a bit of carrot and stick in terms of getting people. I do think we need to make the wrong things a bit harder to do. Like if I think where I live and recycling, we have a really reliable, great service, very comprehensive. I can, recycle every week, and I have food waste every week, but I also have unrestricted residual waste every week. So clearly I choose to maximize the recycling and food recycling, but some of my neighbours I notice just don't bother because they can put as much residual out as they like, and I think until that's made harder for them. So you've got to sometimes, as well as offering people the good choices, maybe make the bad choices more difficult.
Very good advice. Hopefully, we've given the audience a little bit of food for thought. I'd like to thank them for an unbelievable set of commentary and engagement throughout the session. So thank you for that. Emma will share the report in due course. We'll take on board some of this feedback, of course, because why wouldn't we? It'd be rude not to. And I'd like to thank my panelists for being honest and open and bring a really broad perspective or two to the debate today. So my final question to the pair of you is, I'm taking my recycled tank top from the 1970s from a reuse shop near me, and I'm going to print something on the back that's going to summarize today's great content. Khalid, what is my hashtag? And remember, it's got to go on social media, so it's not a lot of characters.
Useless.
Hashtag useless. Is that useless or useless? I'll leave that hanging. Very nice. Emma, can you top Khalid? He's good at this game. Hashtag.
No. Hashtag consumer is king.
Very good. And I'm going to go with Karen's hashtag make do amend. I'm loving that. It takes me back a good few decades. Listen, it's been my pleasure. I'm going to hand you back now to Sweta. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Khalid. And thank you, Emma. I just want to add, we have do less harm as well in the comments, which could go into the list of hashtags. Thanks a lot, all of you. And a reminder to the audience that our this is being recorded and will be up on our website in a couple of weeks' time. And if the report is ready by then, we will add it. Otherwise, we will amend and ensure it gets added, and you'll get it on our newsletter. Here's the link to our fundraiser. If you find the time, please go on to it. Bye-bye.
Cheers.